At my son's birthday party, when he introduced his stepfather as my real father and me as my mother's ex-husband, I just smiled and quietly left. That week he was denied a bank loan and his trip to Europe was canceled. My ex showed up in tears, begging for mercy. Everything changed when my ex came to the doorstep of my house in tears. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I walked through Layla's front door carrying a wrapped gift, expecting the usual awkward but civil birthday gathering. The living room buzzed with conversation until Peter spotted me from across the room. "Oh, that's my mom's ex-husband," he announced loudly, gesturing toward an empty chair near the kitchen. "Come sit over here." The silverware stopped clinking. Someone's fork hit their plate with a sharp ping. Even the birthday candles seemed to flicker uneasily in the sudden silence. I smiled. The same smile I'd perfected through 30 years of marriage and 5 years of divorce. "Happy birthday, Peter." Emily looked mortified. She whispered as I sat down, "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's gotten into him lately." "It's fine, sweetheart." But my eyes had already found the gleaming car keys on the coffee table. BMW. New by the look of the pristine keychain. Mark, Layla's husband of 3 years, raised his glass. To Peter, the son I never had but always wanted. Peter beamed, clinking glasses with his stepfather. "Thanks, Dad. Really. For everything." Dad. The word hit like a physical blow. I remembered buying Peter his first bicycle when he was 7, working double shifts at the plant for 2 months to afford it. His face had lit up the same way then. "Glenn paid for Peter's college," Emily said quietly, defensively. "That was different," Peter said, not even looking at me. "That was just what you're supposed to do." Just what I was supposed to do. 4 years of his tuition, his apartment rent, his car insurance until he was 28. The wedding I'd paid for that lasted 8 months. Layla appeared beside Mark, her arm sliding around his waist. Well, Mark gave Peter something much more valuable than money. He gave him a real father figure. The birthday cake sat untouched between us, 35 candles burning down to nothing. I watched the wax drip onto the frosting and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Remember when you bought me that bike, Glenn?" Peter asked suddenly. Hope flickered. "Your first bike. You rode it around the block 12 times that day." "Yeah, well, Mark just bought me something much better." He jangled the BMW keys. Brand new, not some used piece of junk. The bike had been used. I'd spent weeks searching for one in good condition, something I could afford. He'd loved it anyway, or so I'd thought. I set down my fork carefully. The metal felt cold against my fingers. Around me, the party continued. Forced laughter, nervous chatter, the scrape of chairs against hardwood. But something had crystallized in that moment, sharp and unforgiving. Peter was still talking about the car, about Mark's generosity, about how nice it was to finally have a real father who understood him. Each word carved deeper into something that had been building for years. I looked at my son, really looked at him. 35 years old, unemployed for the 3rd time this year, living off handouts and calling it love. And I saw exactly what I'd created. The candles had burned down to stubs. Party guests were checking their phones, ready to leave. Emily kept glancing at me with worried eyes. I felt the familiar urge to smooth things over, to make excuses, to be the bigger person. But for the first time in decades, I let that feeling pass right through me. The evening stretched on like a slow-motion disaster. Peter launched into story after story about Mark's wisdom, his business success, his real father qualities. Each tale was punctuated by pointed glances in my direction. "Mark taught me how to negotiate," Peter said, cutting into his cake. "How to really stand up for myself, not just roll over when people try to take advantage." "That's wonderful, honey," Layla murmured, refilling Mark's wine glass. I remember teaching Peter to ride that bike, running alongside him until my lungs burned, holding the seat steady while he found his balance, letting go only when he was ready. "Why didn't you ever get me something like this, Dad?" Peter asked, dangling the BMW keys again. "I mean, you had the money. You just chose not to." had the money. I'd had 2 jobs for most of his childhood, skipped vacations for 15 years to pay for his soccer camps, his music lessons, his college application fees. But Mark could write 1 check and become the hero. "Your father worked very hard for everything he gave you," Emily said firmly. "Yeah, but there's a difference between working hard and actually caring," Peter shot back. "Mark cares enough to really help, not just throw money at problems." I gripped my fork. The metal warmed under my palm. "Peter," I said quietly, "I think you're being unfair." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Unfair? Glenn, you missed half my games because you were working. You missed my graduation because you had the flu. When have you ever put me first? When I'd sold my motorcycle to pay for your senior trip. When I'd taken out a second mortgage for your wedding. When I'd co-signed your apartment lease after your second bankruptcy. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I watched him lean back in his chair, satisfied with his performance, and felt something final click into place. The other guests had gone quiet again. Someone coughed. A clock ticked somewhere in the kitchen. "You know what, Peter?" I stood up slowly, folding my napkin. "You're absolutely right." His smugness faltered slightly. "What?" "I should have taught you to be more grateful. Should have shown you that actions have consequences." I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "My mistake." "Glenn?" Layla said sharply. "Don't make a scene." "I'm not making anything." I reached for my jacket. "I'm just leaving." Emily jumped up. "Dad, wait." "It's fine, sweetheart." "Really?" I kissed her cheek. "Tell your brother I hope he enjoys his gift." Peter was frowning now, uncertain. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled at him. The same smile I'd given him when he was 7, and thought he'd hidden his broken lamp well enough that I wouldn't find it. "Happy birthday, son." I walked to the door, hearing the confused murmur of voices behind me. Emily's footsteps followed me onto the porch. "Dad, you can't just leave like this." "Actually, I can." I turned to face her. "I've been letting this slide for too long. Your brother thinks I'm just some pushover he can use and discard. Time to show him what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you." Her eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing dramatic. Just stop being so helpful." I squeezed her shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart. You'll understand soon enough." I walked down the driveway past Mark's pristine sedan and Peter's old Honda, the car I'd helped him buy 2 years ago when his credit was shot. The April evening was crisp, full of possibility. Behind me, the porch light flickered on. Emily was still standing there, watching me go. For the first time in years, I felt completely clear about what came next. The cool Billings air hit my face as I stepped into the night. Each footstep on the sidewalk echoed my thoughts. 35 years of giving, and this is what I got back. I shoved my hands deeper into my jacket pockets. The walk home stretched before me like a timeline of memories. Every crack in the pavement seemed to remind me of another time I'd bent over backward for Peter. That crack by the Miller's house? Peter's 16th birthday when he demanded a car instead of the used truck I'd found. "Dad, you're so cheap," he'd said. "Why can't you get me something nice for once?" I worked 3 extra shifts that month to upgrade his gift. My shoes crunched over fallen leaves as I passed the corner store. The neon signs buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh blue light. A car drove by with a father and teenage son inside, laughing at something on the radio. The sight twisted something in my chest. Enough. No more. The hill leading to my apartment complex felt steeper than usual. Each step upward reminded me of all the times I'd climbed out of debt to help Peter. His failed restaurant venture, $15,000 down the drain. His business course that never led anywhere, another $8,000. His wedding to that girl who left him after her credit cards got maxed out, $12,000 for a party that lasted 5 hours. A streetlight flickered as I passed underneath. The shadows danced like all the sleepless nights I'd spent worrying about his future while he slept off hangovers in his 20s. "You never believe in me," he'd said once during a particularly bad fight. Mark would understand my dreams. Mark. Mark, who'd known Peter for 3 years and bought his affection with a car. Mark, who'd never held Peter's head while he threw up from his first hangover, never taught him to change a tire, never sat through parent-teacher conferences explaining why his grades were slipping. I turned the key in my door after the long walk. The apartment felt smaller somehow, filled with the weight of everything I'd finally admitted to myself. The photos on my mantle stared back at me. Peter at various ages, always smiling, always reaching for something just out of frame. In my bedroom, I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the bed. The digital clock blinked 10:47 p.m. Tomorrow was Friday. Peter would probably sleep until noon, then spend the day showing off his new car to friends, while Mark basked in the gratitude. But credit cards had limits. Bank accounts had administrators. And after 28 years of marriage and 5 years of divorce, I knew exactly how financial responsibility worked. I pulled off my shoes, letting them drop to the floor with a satisfying thud. Outside, billing settled into its quiet rhythm. Distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere, the hum of electrical lines. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, I dreamed of bicycle wheels turning and the sound of my son's laughter when he still needed me to keep him balanced. I woke trembling. Morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains like a spotlight on purpose. The trembling from my dreams had settled into something steadier. Resolve crystallizing in my chest like winter air in my lungs. I sat up, ran my hands through my hair, and felt the weight of decades lifting off my shoulders. Today, Peter would learn what accountability looked like. 20 minutes later, I was in my truck, driving downtown toward First National Bank. The radio played some oldie station, but I barely heard it. My mind was already at the bank, already signing papers, already watching Peter's safety net disappear. The downtown traffic was light for a Friday morning. I pulled into the bank's parking lot and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, I could see the brick building where I'd opened Peter's account 15 years ago during his first post-divorce meltdown. "I just need something to fall back on," he'd said then, 20 and desperate after his girlfriend had cleaned out their joint account. "Just until I get back on my feet." 15 years. Still on his feet, apparently comfortable enough to publicly humiliate the man who'd kept him there. Inside the bank, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, looked up as I approached. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. How can I help you today?" "I need to remove someone from my account," I said, pulling out my wallet. "Peter Reynolds. He's had access for years, but that arrangement needs to end." She clicked through her computer screen, frowning slightly. "Is there a specific reason for the change?" "He's old enough to manage his own finances." The words came out calmer than I felt. It's time he learned responsibility. The paperwork took 15 minutes. Each signature felt like closing a door that should have been shut years ago. The pen moved across the forms with satisfying precision. Revoke access, remove authorization, suspend privileges. "This takes effect immediately," the teller explained, handing me copies. "He'll receive notification within 24 hours. "Perfect." Walking back to my truck, I felt lighter than I had in months. The Montana sky stretched endlessly blue above the downtown buildings, and for once, it felt full of possibility instead of obligation. I just reached my driver's door when my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. My thumb hovered over the screen. Something in my gut told me this was just the beginning. The phone buzzed again before I could even start the engine. This time, it rang. Peter. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello." "What the hell did you do?" His voice cracked like it used to when he was 12 and caught stealing candy. "My card was declined at the gas station. They said insufficient funds." I pulled over to focus on the conversation. "You'll need to use your own account from now on." "My own account?" The hysteria was building. "Dad, you can't just cut me off like this. I have bills to pay. I have commitments." Bills. Commitments. Always someone else's problem to solve. "You're 35, Peter. Most people manage their own finances by now." "This is about last night, isn't it?" His voice turned venomous. "Because I didn't kiss your ass enough at my own birthday party?" Last year, he'd called me at midnight from a casino in Reno, sobbing about maxed out credit cards and threatening eviction. I'd wired him $3,000 and told him it was the last time. But there'd been other times since then. This isn't punishment, I said calmly. It's accountability. Accountability? He laughed bitterly. You want to know about accountability? How about all those years you were never around? Working late? Business trips? Missing everything that mattered? Working late to pay for his karate lessons? Business trips to afford his college tuition? Missing social events to fund his lifestyle? I'm hanging up now. Don't you dare. You think you can just destroy my life because your feelings got hurt? I'll tell everyone what kind of father you really are. Mom already knows. Peter. My voice carried more authority than I'd felt in years. You're not my responsibility anymore. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. You'll regret this, he whispered finally. You think you can humiliate me and walk away? You have no idea what's coming. The line went dead. I sat in my truck for several minutes, watching ordinary people go about their Friday routines. A mother pushing a stroller, a businessman checking his phone, an elderly couple holding hands as they crossed the street. None of them had spent 35 years enabling someone who saw kindness as weakness. I checked my messages. 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. A text from Emily asking if I was okay. And now, as I watched, a new message from Layla's number appeared on my screen. The war, it seemed, was about to begin in earnest. Layla's message was brief and cold. Fix this. Now. You're destroying this family out of spite. But before I could even process that fully, my phone rang. Emily. Dad, what's happening? Peter's posting crazy stuff on Facebook about you abandoning the family. I drove home while she read me the posts. Peter's version painted me as a vindictive ex-husband who'd cut off his innocent son for daring to love his stepfather. Comments were already appearing from relatives I barely spoke to anymore. He's saying you never supported him, Emily continued, her voice tight with anger. That you're jealous of Mark's success and taking it out on him. I remembered the divorce proceedings 5 years ago. Layla had wanted half of everything, including my retirement fund. She'd claimed she deserved it after 28 years of sacrifice. The same woman who'd never worked a day while I pulled double shifts. Let him post whatever he wants. Dad, you can't just ignore this, Aunt Carol is commenting. Uncle Dave, even some of your old work friends. By the time I reached my apartment, the posts had multiplied. Peter had shared his story in 3 different family chat groups. Layla had added her own commentary about my cruel abandonment and midlife breakdown. There it was. Lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. I scrolled through the comments, watching distant relatives take sides. Some defended me, but others bought Peter's narrative completely. My phone kept buzzing with notifications as the story spread. Glenn always was selfish, Layla had written. I should have seen this coming years ago. Selfish. The woman who'd redecorated our house 3 times while I drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. Who'd insisted on private schools I couldn't afford and vacations that maxed out credit cards. I set the phone aside and walked to my kitchen window. The sun was setting behind the Beartooth Mountains, painting everything golden. Somewhere out there, Peter was probably celebrating his successful character assassination, confident he'd backed me into a corner. But as I watched the light fade, a calendar reminder popped up on my phone. Something I'd forgotten in all the drama. My annual fishing trip to Yellowstone. Booked and paid for months ago. 2 weeks of solitude in the wilderness, completely off the grid. Perfect timing for a man who needed to disappear while his family destroyed each other in his absence. I smiled and started packing. A few hours later, as I sat reviewing emails at my kitchen table, another reminder surfaced on my laptop screen. The brightness cut through the evening dimness like a spotlight on forgotten promises. Europe trip confirmation. Departure, May 15th. Passenger, Peter Reynolds. The business class tickets I'd bought him for graduation. The luxury hotel in Rome. The rental car upgrade he'd specifically requested because regular cars are so cramped, Dad. 3 weeks of indulgence that had cost me nearly $8,000. I'd booked it all 6 months ago when he'd called crying about his life falling apart and needing something to look forward to. The same week I'd eaten canned soup for dinner 4 nights running to balance my budget. My cursor hovered over the Manage Booking button. Through my window, the Beartooth Mountains stretched endlessly under darkening sky, their peaks catching the last light like promises that actually got kept. Click. The airline's website opened to crisp efficiency, flight details, hotel reservations, car rental confirmation, all of it paid for, all of it refundable with a small penalty, small price for a large lesson. Cancel entire booking. The system asked if I was sure. Was I sure? I thought about Peter's face when he'd called Mark his real father, his dismissive gesture toward the empty chair, the way Layla had smiled approvingly when he'd humiliated me. Yes, I was sure. My finger tapped confirm cancellation with the same authority I'd once used signing his report cards, approving his emergency room visits, co-signing his apartment leases, but this time, I was the one making demands. The screen flickered. Processing. Processing. Then, cancellation complete, refund amount, $7,047.32, or nearly $8,000 returning to my account within 5 business days. $8,000 that wouldn't fund his Roman holiday while he posted lies about my cruelty online. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something shift in my chest like tectonic plates finding new alignment. The mountains outside had gone completely dark now, but my kitchen light made everything clear. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Unknown number again. For the first time in 35 years, I looked forward to hearing what my son had to say. It wasn't long before my phone lit up, his voice already thunderous before I'd even finished saying hello. What did you do? Peter's words came out strangled, desperate. My Europe trip is canceled. The airline says you canceled everything. I set the phone on speaker and returned to my laptop screen. That's correct. You can't do that. Those were my tickets, my vacation. I've been planning this for months. I paid for them. They were in my name. I can cancel them. Heavy breathing, a long pause. Then his voice cracked into something I hadn't heard since he was small. Dad, please. This trip means everything to me. It's the only good thing I have right now. The only good thing. Not his new car, not his loving stepfather, not his supportive mother, just the vacation I'd funded while he called me his mother's ex-husband. Call Mark, I said quietly. Ask your real father to rebook it. Silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. He can't. That's not. Peter's voice faltered. Look, maybe I said some things last night that came out wrong. Call him Peter. Another pause. Then fury returned, sharp and brittle. Fine. I will. Mark will help me, you'll see. He actually cares about my happiness. The line went quiet. I could hear him dialing, the electronic beeps carrying through the speaker like a countdown. My kitchen clock ticked steadily. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once and fell silent. Mark? Peter's voice was different now, smaller. Hey, it's Peter. There's been a problem with my Europe trip. I couldn't hear Mark's side of the conversation, but I could track it through Peter's responses. His voice started confident, explaining the situation, asking for help. Then it shifted, became pleading. But it's only $8,000. You bought me a car worth twice that. Silence. Mark? Are you... Hello? The call timer showed 3 minutes and 17 seconds. 3 minutes for a stepfather to reveal exactly how much his love was worth when it required actual sacrifice. Peter's breathing was audible through the speaker. Sharp. Uneven. He said no. The words came out like he was learning a foreign language. He said $8,000 is too much for a vacation. Did he? But he loves me. He said I was the son he never had. Peter's voice was breaking apart. He bought me the car. A car with monthly payments, Peter. Did you check the financing details? Silence. Call the dealership, I suggested gently. Ask who's actually making the payments. I could almost hear his world reshaping itself, brick by careful brick of illusion crumbling away. But there was still more to learn. Morning light filtered through my kitchen window when the doorbell chimed, sharp and demanding. I wasn't expecting anyone, but somehow I wasn't surprised to find Layla standing on my doorstep, mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. "You have to fix this." Her voice cracked before she'd even crossed the threshold. "Peter's having a breakdown. He sold his car yesterday." I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she clutched a wadded tissue like a lifeline. "Did he?" "Glenn, please." She followed me to the living room, her heels clicking frantically on my hardwood floor. "This has gone too far. He's talking about getting a job, for God's sake. An actual job." The horror in her voice was almost amusing. I sat down across from her, watching tears pool in the corners of her eyes. The same tears that had worked so effectively during our marriage whenever she'd wanted something I couldn't afford. And that's a problem, because he's 35 years old. He shouldn't have to start over like some college graduate. Her hands fluttered helplessly. You know how sensitive he is, how hard change is for him. Sensitive. The same word she'd used when he'd flunked out of his first job, his second, his third. Always sensitive, never accountable. I remembered the divorce papers, how she'd argued for half my retirement fund because she'd sacrificed her career for our family. The career she'd never actually started. The sacrifices that had consisted mainly of spending my paychecks on redecorating projects and weekend trips. He called Mark again last night. She continued desperately. Begged him to reconsider the Europe trip. Mark hung up on him. Did he? Her face crumpled completely. Glenn, you know I chose Mark for security, for stability. But $8,000 for a vacation? He says that's excessive, that Peter needs to learn limits. She looked at me with genuine confusion. Limits, Glenn? Can you imagine? I could imagine many things. Mark writing one impressive check to win a son's loyalty. Mark drawing the line when real money was involved. Mark discovering what I'd known for decades, that Peter's gratitude had a very short shelf life. You created this mess, Layla whispered, dabbing at her eyes. You can uncreate it. Just give him the trip back. Put him on your account again. Everything can go back to normal. Normal. 35 years of normal had led us here, to my ex-wife sobbing in my living room because her son might actually have to work for a living. I reached for my wallet on the side table, pulled out a $20 bill and set it between us. That's all I'm giving anyone in this family ever again. Her mouth fell open. $20? Bus fare, in case Peter needs to get to his job interview. I stood up and walked to the door, holding it open. The April breeze carried the scent of blooming lilacs, spring finally arriving in Billings, like hope taking root after a long winter. Layla stared at the 20 on the table as if it might transform into something larger. When it didn't, she snatched it up and stuffed it in her purse with wounded dignity. You'll regret this, she said, exactly like Peter had. When he's homeless, when he's struggling, when he realizes his father abandoned him, his stepfather, I corrected gently. Mark, the man he chose. The door closed behind her with a satisfying click, leaving my house quiet and clean again. Days blurred in quiet routine until news trickled in through Emily's evening call on Tuesday. Her voice carried a note of amazement I hadn't heard in years. Dad, you're not going to believe this. Peter got a job. I paused with my coffee cup halfway to my lips. A job? At a call center downtown. Customer service. It's entry level, but she sounded almost giddy. He starts Monday, 8:30 in the morning. Peter, who hadn't seen 8:30 in the morning since high school graduation. Peter, who'd once told me that traditional employment was soul-crushing and beneath his entrepreneurial spirit. He sold the BMW too, Emily continued. Got enough to cover 3 months' rent on a studio apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's his own place. I thought about the gleaming car keys he dangled so proudly at his birthday party, the symbol of Mark's superior fatherhood, now converted into practical necessities like rent and groceries. How's Layla handling it? Emily's laugh held a bitter edge. she's furious, keeps calling it a temporary setback and insisting Mark will come through eventually. But Peter isn't taking her calls anymore. The April evening settled around my apartment like a comfortable blanket. Through my window, I could see neighbors tending their gardens, preparing for another Montana growing season. Life continuing its patient cycles of planting and harvesting. Is he angry? I asked. That's the strange part. He sounds different. Tired, but not angry. He asked me for your address yesterday. My coffee grew cold as I processed this. My address? I think he wants to talk to you, face to face. Emily's voice softened. Dad, I don't know what you did, but whatever it was, I think it worked. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen as darkness fell over Billings. Somewhere across town, my 35-year-old son was probably figuring out what to wear to his first real job, setting an alarm clock for the first time in years, learning the weight of real responsibility. The satisfaction settled in my chest like warm whiskey. Not the bitter triumph I'd expected, but something quieter. Better. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This time, when I opened it, the message was only 2 words. Thank you. I smiled and started planning what I'd say when he knocked on my door. More days slipped by in contemplation until a familiar figure approached my front steps on a quiet Saturday morning. Through the window, I watched Peter pause at my mailbox, gathering courage like armor before battle. He looked different. Smaller somehow, though he'd actually lost weight. His hair was shorter, more practical. Gone was the casual arrogance I'd grown accustomed to, replaced by something that resembled humility. The knock came soft, tentative. Nothing like the demanding presence he'd carried at his birthday party. Dad? His voice cracked slightly when I opened the door. Could I come in? Please? I stepped aside without a word. He entered slowly, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on my hardwood floor like it held answers to questions he was just learning to ask. Coffee? I offered. That would be nice. We sat at my kitchen table, steam rising between us like incense in a church. He wrapped his fingers around the mug as if drawing warmth from more than just the ceramic. I wanted to say, he stopped, started again. I owe you an apology, a real one. I waited. What I said at my party, calling you Mom's ex-husband, treating you like some stranger. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That was cruel and wrong. The words hung in the air between us. Outside, a cardinal called to its mate from the oak tree I'd planted when Peter was 7, the same tree he'd helped me water every day that first summer, so proud to be trusted with grown-up responsibility. The job is hard, he continued, meeting my eyes for the first time. My feet hurt every night. I've never been so tired in my life. But Dad, he smiled shakily. I earned that paycheck, every dollar of it. I forgot what that felt like. And the apartment? It's tiny, basically a closet with a hot plate. But it's mine. Pride flickered in his voice, an emotion I hadn't heard from him in decades. I paid the deposit myself. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. All of it. I remember the last apartment I'd helped him secure, how he'd complained about the carpet color, the size of the closets, the distance from downtown. How he'd moved out 3 months later when someone offered him a better deal that fell through. Mark won't return my calls, he said quietly. Mom keeps telling me this is temporary, that I should wait for him to come around. But I don't think I want him to anymore. Why's that? Peter stared into his coffee like it might reveal secrets. Because when I really needed help, when I was desperate and scared, he disappeared. You taught me that actions matter more than words. Mark's actions showed me exactly who I could count on. And who can you count on? Myself. The word came out strong, certain. For the first time in my life, I know I can count on myself. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the cardinal pair build their nest, new beginnings taking shape, one careful twig at a time. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Peter said finally. I know I have a lot to prove, but I want you to know. I'm not the same person who humiliated you at that party." I reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. His work shirt was wrinkled but clean, earned through honest labor. "You already proved it by showing up here," I said. "That took real courage." He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since he was small. With that chapter mended, weeks unfolded in fresh rhythm. My mornings began with walks through Riverfront Park, greeting neighbors who'd become friends over the years. Mrs. Patterson from down the street always waved from her garden. Joe from the hardware store would nod and smile during his morning jog. For the first time in decades, I felt completely free. "You look different," Emily observed during our weekly lunch at the downtown cafe. "Lighter somehow." I sipped my coffee and watched the Saturday crowd bustle past the window. Families with strollers, teenagers sharing earbuds, elderly couples holding hands. Life in all its messy, wonderful varieties. "I feel different," I admitted, "like I've been carrying someone else's luggage for 35 years and finally put it down." She laughed, the sound carrying genuine joy. "Peter's doing well, you know. He got promoted to team leader at the call center. They're giving him a small raise." "Good for him. He asks about you sometimes, wonders if you're proud of him." "Tell him I am." And I meant it. The young man who'd shown up at my door bore little resemblance to the entitled stranger who'd humiliated me at his birthday party. Work had given him purpose. Independence had given him dignity. That afternoon, I stopped by the travel agency downtown, something I hadn't done for myself in years. The walls were covered with postcards from exotic locations, promises of adventures I'd always postponed for someone else's needs. "Planning a trip, Mr. Reynolds?" asked Sarah, the agent who'd helped me book Peter's canceled Europe vacation. "Maybe Alaska," I said, studying a brochure featuring pristine wilderness and glacier-fed lakes. "I've always wanted to see the northern lights." "Wonderful choice. When would you like to go?" "Whenever I want." The words tasted like freedom. I'm retired. My children are grown. And my time is my own. Driving home with booking information in my passenger seat, I took the long route through the hills overlooking Billings. The city spread below me like a patchwork quilt, each neighborhood telling its own story of struggle and triumph, loss and renewal. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "Thank you for teaching me what a real father does. Love you, Dad." I pulled over at the scenic overlook and stepped out of my truck. The Beartooth Mountains stretched endlessly toward the horizon, their peaks catching the late afternoon sun like promises waiting to be kept. Somewhere up there, mountain goats navigated impossible cliffs, eagles soared on thermals, and wildflowers bloomed in meadows no human eye would ever see. The world was vast and full of possibilities I'd never given myself permission to explore. But that was then. A breeze carried hints of pine and possibility, whispering of paths untaken and adventures yet to come. I breathed deeply, tasting freedom on the Montana air. In the distance, a train whistled, heading somewhere I'd never been, carrying stories I'd never heard, promising destinations I could now choose for myself. I smiled and got back in my truck, already planning my next journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.